Welcome back to my basement. This will be the final video of the magazine search tool I've been working on now since May. To reiterate, the idea was simply to make my gaming magazine collection searchable and maybe also make it easy for someone with a bit of coding skills at least to utilize my project to make her own collection of magazines searchable. At least to understand what is needed under the hood to make something like this work. And it was a success. I can now search through 1,500 PDF magazines or 175,000 pages while filtering the results on either a specific time period or a specific magazine. The project took on a life of its own though, when I finally decided to dive into the Qt framework for Python. It was a slight learning curve, but it's now my favorite UI framework for Python at least. The Whoosh search library was also very impressive and easy to learn, and a query without filters takes now about 1 second to search through all those 175,000 pages. And if you apply filters like specifying which magazine you want results from or a time period, it takes about 2 seconds to do the query. I've also made all the code available and the link will be in the video descriptions. Next, we will have a look at the application I've created, and we will also do a small end-to-end tutorial to showcase how to use the tool if you want to dive into it yourself.
Okay, so let's showcase the final UI by an example. Let's search for Rambo. As you can see down here, the search index consists of a little bit over 175,000 pages, which is the 1,500 PDF magazines I was talking about earlier. And we have over 1,000 results for the keyword Rambo. The first one we see is pretty recent. It's from Retro Gamer 2008, and it's it's a good hit, I guess. But let's say that we want to find the review of the initial game on the C64. So let's look at Wikipedia, and we can see that it was initially released in 1985. Okay, so we can use the tool to say that we want to search articles from 1970 to 1986, for example, and we reissue the query. We see that the first hit now is from Crash magazine in 1986, and it's indeed a review of the first Rambo game for the C64. We can also see that there are some from the SAP. The next page. Yeah, it's also even an article about the making of the game with an interview of the developers. So that's pretty neat. You can also filter on here as we just saw, and you can also filter on a specific magazine. So we know that there are some hits for SAP, so let's filter specifically on that magazine for this time period, and we get the test of the Rambo game from SAP magazine. So let's demo the magazine parser first. I have prepared a test directory so that we don't have to wait hours and hours and days for parsing all the documents, because it takes quite a while. I have the source code in the source directory, and I have one Commodore format magazine in the magazines directory. Okay, so let's go Go into the command line tool. You can see the same as in Windows Explorer. You have a magazine folder and a source folder. Let's look at the source. And basically just execute the parser. If you type -h, it will show a little bit more help. So what it needs is the input directory, and that is the directory of the magazines. And then it needs to be supplied an output directory, and this is where it should store all the extracted images and text. The tool will use optical character recognition to extract the text from the images. One page is one image, and then it will also create a small image which is used in the search results, a thumbnail. So let's do the work. Parser, and it needs the input directly, which is where the original PDF magazines are, and or in this case just one magazine, but workspace magazine search tests. Let's say that we want to put it in a folder called output. Yeah, then we start it. It will now process the files in that directory, and it's just one magazine in this case. It will load 10 and 10 pages and extract the image from the page, and then do optical character recognition on that image and store the text in the txt file and the thumbnail of that page. So let's look at this run. I'll probably speed it up a little bit, and then we will look at the output of this stage next. So as we saw, it took quite some time to process a magazine. We started at 11:33 and finished at 11:46, so about 13 minutes to process the magazine. I have not implemented the processing in parallel, so it will take more than one document. So that is something we could look into for the future. Let's look at the output. The input was one Commodore format magazine, and the output is a folder for the magazine processed. And then for each page you have the extracted text and the corresponding thumbnail image. So let's see, there's usually not much text on the first page, so let's just look randomly at page 6. And as you can see, it has extracted some text, and most of it is readable. That is of course a problem with the optical character recognition. It's not always good, but this looks pretty good actually. And if we look at the thumbnail, this is the page extracted. So it's Activision. Yeah. Let's look at the indexer tool next. So the magazine indexer is implemented in the magazine indexer file. We won't go into the code here of this tool, but we will demo how you can use it. So now we have parsed the documents, and then we can index them, meaning that we can make them searchable. So if we go into the source directory where the tools are located, and then we execute the indexer, we see what parameters it needs. It will need the directory of the parsed magazines. That was the output of the magazine parser, and it will need the directory of the original magazines. This is because it needs to know where it can find the original magazine, as the specific search results will point towards that. And also the output directory will need to be specified, and this is where the tool should create the search index itself. Okay, so supplying the arguments. So the parsed document is in output, and then we need to supply the directory of the original magazines, which is in magazines, and then we need to specify where the tool should store the index. Then we will just put that under index. Okay, so let's execute the tool. This is using the Whoosh search library, and the tool is also utilizing the parallel feature of that library. So we will run 4 document processors in parallel indexing data, so it will be pretty fast. That was it. For 175,000 documents it will take a lot longer, of course, but for just one magazine it's super fast. Let's look at the output. So it took the output directory as input and the original magazine as input, and then it created the search index, which we placed under the index folder. And this is the search index. It's not something you can look at, but it's there. We will have a quick look at the magazine mapper file before we head over to the search UI. This is not a command line tool, but it's a library that the indexer and the search UI is using. And this mapper is ensuring that it's able to map basically the file names to the actual magazine name, and also map magazines to the year they were issued, so that we can filter on the specific year in the search UI. So this is a file you might have to get into if you want to parse your own documents, at least if you want the date range filtering to work, and you want a magazine or being able to filter on a specific magazine, like just show results from SAP, for instance. So yeah, you should check it out. This is to convert the file name of the magazine to what to store in the index. So big K is translated to BK, and this is what is stored in the index. In the UI, when you get the result back, it will just say BK, and you need to translate that back to the specific magazine name. You can see that BK here is big K. So in the init function, you map the index name to the user-friendly name, and then it will automatically create the reverse mapping from the user-friendly name you select on the filter in the UI to the indexed name. And here we have the the function that maps a specific file name to the year. Many of the magazines have the year in the file name, so it's just extracted, as we can see. But some we have to hard code, which is a little bit funny. Some we just know the issue number for, so we will do a range. We know that issue 25 to 33 is from 1986, or I know at least, for Computer Gaming World, because I've checked it, and it will return the appropriate year to be indexed, so that you can filter on it in the search front end. So yeah, if you want to do this yourself, you should look into this file. Okay, so the last part is the search frontend, which is implemented in this file. I will not go into the code of this either, but let's check out the user interface, or how to launch it. Let's see. Okay, so this is the search frontend, and you need to configure it first. You choose the directory of the search index, which is under workspace test index, and you need to supply the Foxit PDF reader executable, or point it towards where you can find it. This is Foxit, and there it is, Foxit PDF reader. Okay, so once you have done that, it's ready to be tested. As we remember, there was some talk about Activision on page 6, so let's test that, I guess. Well, I didn't find page 6. That's because the pages in the output directory starts with 0, so page 7 is actually page 6 in the output directory. So the first hit is the page that we looked at earlier. And if you don't believe me, we will go back to the output folder, and then we will look at, as you see that the pages start with page 0, and page 6 is this one, Activision. And if you look at the thumbnail of page 6, it should be the same as this page, as we can see. Okay, that was it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.